Okay. What's next?
Next up is full frame versus crop sensor.
Full frame versus crop sensor.
Yes.
Right, let's head back to the drawing board.
Yes.
Let's get it.
Let's get it.
Lekker guys, it's Gunther here from Outdoorphoto, and today for ODP 101 we're going to discuss the differences between full frame and crop sensor and exactly how that size makes a difference in your image quality. So excuse my new halo that I've got, but let's dive into this. Looking at the different crop sensor, full frame sensor sizes, we're actually going to dive into kind of a bit of a practical and then a recap right in the end. But when we have a look at crop sensor is a more affordable version or smaller sensor type versus full frame, which is the old equivalent to the film era, the 35mm film. So typically speaking, you're looking at about a 36 by 24mm sensor size on the full frames. On the crop sensor, however, it is somewhat smaller. So there are a couple of differences. There are pros and cons to both of them, but it doesn't help we just talk about it. I'd like to demonstrate how it affects your image quality, your focal length, and everything else. We've got an R7 from Canon. It is a crop sensor. Canon uses what they call a 1.6 times crop factor. So when we fix this into this little tripod and I give it a feed, looking at the advantages of having set up the Atom Mini Extreme down here, we've got multiple inputs so that we can demonstrate exactly these kinds of things to you guys. So enters our third camera angle. Boom, there we go. Depending on the lighting conditions and everything else, there are somewhat issues that you can encounter depending on the lenses that you're using or the apertures that you're shooting at, and there might be a slight difference versus what you get into a full frame. We've set these up in a way so that we can actually demonstrate this to you in terms of what it changes in your focal length. So using an R5 Mark II that uses a full HDMI port, I can now put this thing on and I can give it a video feed, and then we just have to try and align these two cameras up perfectly for you. Now that we've set these two cameras up at exactly the same settings, we're going to have a look at the differences that full frame offers with a specific focal length. We're going to take that same focal length across onto the crop sensor and give you an example of what it does to your image. So let's take a step back. Getting into how it exactly affects your exposure isn't necessarily related to the video side of things. And looking and diving into what these two cameras offer, on a full frame, you've got a much wider angle of view on the full frame sensor with a 50mm versus the crop sensor that's got a slightly more narrow field of view. So it changes your viewing spot specifically in terms of multiplication. So a lot of people refer to this as a crop factor. Now on Canon's full frame, you've obviously got a crop factor of 1. That's it, it's straight. But as soon as you go to Canon's crop sensor version, it's 1.6 times crop factor. If you have a look at the majority of other brands, you're typically talking about a 1.5 crop factor. Now the effect it has in the different images, you can see in this view on a full frame, you've got a much wider angle of view. There's a lot more that you can see around me. On the crop sensor, it seems like it's a lot closer. Now where that comes into play, or it acts as a bonus, is where you go into the field and you would like to get closer to your subject. The key here is it is a perceived focal distance effect that it has. You aren't magnifying your image. You're seeing a smaller section of the broader picture. And I'll get to that as soon as we get to the recap on the whiteboard. What is happening here is you don't have to go and crop at home. You've got a closer view, you've got better reach, and it's on those amount of pixels. If you go across to the full frame and you want to crop this section to be similar to what it is on the crop sensor, you're going to lose pixels. And that's where the biggest factor comes in between these two sensors. Pixel density on these two sensors makes a huge effect in terms of your low light handling. So when we have a dive into ISO and how that handles and the sensor just handles that information, the full frame tends to handle it a lot better than the crop sensors do, especially in low light conditions. Remember, your high ISO handling will differ between bright light and low lighting conditions. And in terms of low lighting conditions, high ISO, your full frame will, generally speaking, give you better image quality, less noise, be it that much. So let's get another step back and look into what that helps you in terms of your sensor size. Diving into this whole condition and situation that we've got on the whiteboard, I want to talk specifically about how we lifted these cameras up. We've still got them set up exactly the same way. So looking at full frame, I've got some head space, I've got some space. You're seeing way too much. That shouldn't be in the shot, that shouldn't be in the shot, but that's what we've got on a 50mm set up on a full frame sensor at this distance. If we switch across to the crop sensor, I have to bow down because there isn't enough headspace, and they are literally set up exactly at the same distance, height, everything else. You can check it from the top, you can check it from the back, you can check it wherever. These cameras are set up exactly the same, settings are the same. The only thing that differs is the sensor size. So before we dive onto the whiteboard, I'm going to make that disappear thanks to my Amarish. That glare came from our front light. We're just going to switch it off so that you guys can see my beautiful illustrations that I've got running here. Hitting the whiteboard, I'm going to draw up this block. That's going to represent my full frame sensor. It's the equivalent to the old 35mm film, and that's why everybody always talks about focal lengths and the equivalent, 35mm equivalent. We're going to dive into that thing specifically. Now these sensors have lenses designed specifically for them. Depending on what brand, they'll be called different things, but let's, for the help of my maths, make this a 100mm lens. That 100mm lens on this sensor is going to give me an image similar to that. So that's my subject that I just photographed right there. It's beautiful, isn't it? Now, that's plain and simple. That's not too hard to understand. But when we have a look at more affordable technology in terms of sensor size and a variety of different reasons, sensor size on a crop sensor is roughly a factor of 1.5 or 1.6 on Canons. If we're having a look at Canon specifically in this video, that gives us 100mm times 1.6. So it's the 35mm equivalent of a 160mm lens. That means your image is going to look a lot closer to your subject, similar to this full frame view and this crop sensor view. You're a lot closer on the 50mm on the crop sensor versus being a lot further away on the full frame. That is a perceived value in terms of how close you are to your subject. It doesn't magically make you closer to your subject. I'm of the opinion, and I just got to get my colors right here. I'm of the opinion you just don't see the full picture. Yes, there are other options out on the market where there are crop sensor lenses specifically designed for that brand's crop sensor, which also plays a role in this whole equation. But when we dive into the image quality and effects that we get on this, it seems like you are closer. It does help when you're shooting wildlife, when you're shooting birds, but it also kind of holds you back when you're hitting low light conditions right at the end of the day. Now, when we talk about depth of field, which is a major factor here, and again, that word perception or perceived depth of field comes in. Depth of field, if you go and have a look at the links below, or Amaresh will put something around here that'll lead you to our depth of field or aperture video, that's going to take you across into explaining depth of field a little bit better. But if I've got this area in front and behind my subject, and that's my depth of field plane, you'll see that a section of it actually falls outside of the crop sensor, which gives you a perceived deeper or broader depth of field versus a shallow depth of field on your full frame. So it does seem a little bit different, and especially if you take into consideration the sliding scale on depth of field. If you're going to move backwards to frame the same thing on a crop sensor, it means that that depth of field gets stretched out. And again, the depth of field seems different, even though you're still shooting at a very shallow depth of field, like a very low aperture, f1.2. It is going to be different on these two cameras and lenses. Same lenses, different cameras. But let's hit my conclusion. Heading into my conclusion, there are three specific aspects that I want to touch on to. First thing is sensor size does have an effect on your image quality, especially when you're looking at printing. Yes, we've got banners printed in the store on a 20 megapixel GoPro sensor. I mean, that sensor is tiny compared to the crop sensors. Your cell phone has even it's a cutesy patootsy. It is a tiny, tiny little sensor. The magic of cell phones comes from the software and how 200 employees at one fruit branded product works on only the cameras. I mean, they work on only the cameras. That's the only job they've got in that whole establishment. So now we're diving into the software side of things and how that can manipulate and assist in terms of image quality that you get out of crop sensors. That can also be applied to your full frame sensors. So either or. If you're looking at the highest image quality out of the sensor itself, you're looking at bigger sized sensors. If you want to go and print a cell phone image, it is not going to display very well if you print it A4 size or larger. Pixels specifically come in when you want to start cropping in on an image. Again, size of the sensor, I would say, plays a much larger role in your print quality versus your pixel count. Now, getting that out of the way, diving into the intricacies. Your low light handling on a full frame is going to be better versus the crop sensor. The technology and the space in terms of the pixel density on a full frame sensor is a lot better than the pixels density on a crop sensor, which assists when the pixels have to start fighting for information. Once again, hit back one of the other videos that we've got posted already, specifically about ISO, and showing you the differences and how they handle in terms of sensor sizes. Which brings me to my personal opinion and conclusion. What should you choose? The best camera you can afford. That's the honest truth. The best camera you can afford is going to give you amazing image quality because that's what you can afford. But if you can afford full frame, I personally lean more towards full frame. I loved what my Fuji offered me as a crop sensor, and it had low light handling that competed more with your full frames. You will get those exceptions to the rule. You will get from all these different brands cameras that have exceptional low light handling. I myself am a sucker for full frame. Love the effect, love the look, love the handling and feel of the cameras and the files that I get out of it. Yes, a lot of it can be manipulated in post-processing. Yes, crop sensors will give you exceptional image quality. And yes, they do give you that effect of reaching a little bit further when you're shooting wildlife or birding. I am just a sucker for full frame. I love the image quality out of it. I know that I've got somebody just out of screen here that also attests to the image quality that we get out of these full frames versus what we used to get out of the crop sensors in terms of these videos we shot. So if you ask me, have a look at full frame. If you haven't made that jump yet and you have got questions about it, do not hesitate to contact the go-to guys at Outdoorphoto and have that discussion about crop sensor versus full frame and what would work best for your budget and also the genre that you're shooting in. There's a plethora of lenses available for crop sensor, full frame, you name it. You even get smaller sensors if weight becomes an issue. I mean, that's why these things are out there on the market. If you've got arthritis, so let's be honest, some people just can't handle the weight anymore for medical reasons, whatever. I mean, that's where Micro Four Thirds comes in. Small, tiny, lightweight, easy to use, great. Can give you great image quality. Once again, my trusted steed right to the left of me here. I love it, and I'm going to go and shoot it right now. So, cheers, lekker, I'm out.